Number 10. Bastinado. Simple in concept, devastating in execution. The punishment involved beating the soles of the victim's feet exclusively, using a rod, knotted cord, or lash. The feet contained some of the densest concentrations of nerve endings in the entire human body. Every strike sent waves of pain through the legs and spine. Unlike most flogging methods, bastinado was specifically designed to maximize pain without killing. Authorities could keep a prisoner conscious and suffering for hours. In severe cases, the victim lost the ability to walk permanently. The bones of the feet would fracture, the tissue would swell until the skin split, and the victim would scream for the entire duration because there was no way to mentally prepare for pain applied exclusively to that one unbearable location. Number 9. Tarring and feathering. This punishment was as much about humiliation as it was about pain. The victim was stripped naked or to the waist in public. Boiling hot tar was then poured or painted directly onto their bare skin. The tar caused severe burns on contact, blistering the skin within seconds. Before the victim could recover, feathers were thrown onto them, or they were rolled into a pile of feathers that stuck to the tar completely. The victim was then paraded through the streets, looking like a grotesque giant bird, while the crowd laughed and threw things at them. The tar was nearly impossible to remove. Attempts to peel it off removed the burned skin beneath it. Many victims were permanently scarred. The psychological damage of being publicly displayed and humiliated while in agony often lasted longer than the physical wounds. Number 8. The rack. A deceptively simple device that used the body's own structure against itself. The victim was strapped lying flat onto a rectangular wooden frame. Their wrists were bound to a roller at one end, their ankles to a roller at the other end. Then the rollers were turned in opposite directions, slowly. The body stretched, muscles pulled away from bones, ligaments tore with sounds the victim could both hear and feel, joints dislocated at the shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows simultaneously. Inquisitors used the rack primarily to extract confessions. They would stretch the victim to the point of maximum agony, then stop and ask their questions. If the answers were unsatisfactory, the rolling would resume. Some victims had their limbs stretched so far beyond their natural range that they never walked again. Others were pulled completely apart. Number 7. Scaphism, also known as the boats. This method was attributed to the ancient Persians, and it is widely considered among historians to be one of the most drawn-out and psychologically unbearable punishments ever devised. The victim was placed inside 2 boats that fit together like a shell, with their arms, legs, and head protruding through holes at the edges. They were then force-fed enormous amounts of milk and honey until severe diarrhea began. Their exposed skin and body openings were smeared with the same mixture. The boat was then set adrift on a stagnant pond or swamp. Insects arrived almost immediately. Flies laid eggs in the wounds. Wasps stung repeatedly. Rats and other animals were attracted to the sweet mixture covering the victim's exposed body. The diarrhea pooled inside the boat, creating a warm environment that accelerated the infestation. Each day, the victim was force-fed again and recoded to keep them alive and attractive to the insects. One recorded victim reportedly survived 17 days in this state. By the end, his face was reportedly unrecognizable, completely covered in insects and swarms, his flesh rotting while he remained conscious. Death eventually came from a combination of dehydration, starvation, exposure, and the sheer accumulation of insect damage to every exposed part of his body. Number 6. Blowing from a gun. Used extensively by colonial powers in India and recorded in detail by British military observers in the 19th century. The condemned person was tied directly to the mouth of a loaded cannon. The cannon was then fired. Death was instantaneous, but the manner of it was designed to be witnessed. Contemporary accounts record that the victim's head was propelled straight upward 50 to 60 feet into the air. The arms separated from the body and flew outward, landing roughly 100 yards away in each direction. The legs dropped straight down beneath the cannon's muzzle. The torso disintegrated. The British used this method specifically to suppress rebellion because it served as a public spectacle and also because it destroyed the body completely, which had deep religious significance for Hindu soldiers who believed in the importance of an intact body for the afterlife. The execution was not merely about death, it was about erasing the person entirely from existence in front of their entire community. Number 5. Keelhauling. A maritime punishment used primarily by the Dutch Navy in the 16th and 17th centuries that combined drowning, lacerating, and drowning again into a single punishment. The sailor was tied to a long rope that passed under the hull of the ship. They were then thrown overboard and dragged across the full length of the vessel's bottom from one side to the other. The underside of a wooden ship was encrusted with barnacles, which functioned like razors, shredding exposed skin and clothing as the body was dragged across them. If the sailors survived the laceration, they were then immediately hauled up and thrown in again. The process continued until the person was no longer moving. Many drowned during the first pass, which was considered the merciful outcome. Those who did not drown faced repeated crossings that stripped skin from muscle and muscle from bone. The practice was officially abolished, but was carried out unofficially for decades afterward. Number 4. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. The official state execution method for high treason in medieval Britain, and arguably one of the most deliberately prolonged and theatrical deaths ever codified into law. The convicted traitor was first tied to a wooden board and dragged by a horse through the streets to the execution site, arriving bruised and torn. Then they were hung from the neck, but cut down before death occurred, still conscious. A knife was then used to cut open the abdomen and remove the intestines and other organs while the victim watched. The genitals were removed and burned. Only after this was the victim beheaded. The body was then divided into 4 separate pieces. Each piece was sent to a different prominent public location across the country to be displayed as a warning to others. The head was typically mounted on London Bridge. The intention was not simply to kill the traitor, it was to do so with the maximum possible suffering and visibility, to demonstrate that betraying the crown would result in the complete destruction and public display of your body in pieces across the entire kingdom. Number 3. Brazen Bull. Invented, according to ancient sources, by a Sicilian craftsman named Cruelest, who presented it as a gift to the tyrant Phalaris of Agrigentum around 570 BC. It was a hollow bronze statue in the shape of a full-sized bull. A door in the side allowed a human being to be placed inside. A fire was then lit beneath the statue. The bronze walls heated slowly and evenly, transferring the heat to the person locked within. The design included a system of pipes and tubes inside the bull's head that converted the victim's screams into sounds resembling the bellowing of a real bull, so that the audience watching would hear animal sounds rather than human screaming. The steam of the burning body emerged from the bull's nostrils. The hollow chamber had no ventilation designed to spare the victim. They were simply roasted alive inside a metal oven shaped to look like an animal, while their screams were converted into entertainment for the watching crowd. According to ancient accounts, Cruelest himself was the first person placed inside his invention by Phalaris, who found the idea of the device distasteful, despite immediately using it on his enemies for decades afterward. Number 2. Flaying. The deliberate and methodical removal of a person's skin while they remain alive. This method was practiced across numerous cultures and civilizations, including ancient Assyria, the Aztec Empire, and medieval Europe. The process was performed with sharp blades and required a degree of skill because removing the skin without severing major arteries kept the victim alive longer. The skin contains relatively few large blood vessels, which meant that a skilled executioner could keep the victim conscious and feeling everything for an extended period. The pain of flaying has been described by historians as being beyond the capacity of the human nervous system to process coherently, producing a state of shock in which the victim oscillates between consciousness and incoherence while the process continues. In Assyrian carvings dating to around 883 BC, the flaying of defeated enemies is depicted as a routine military practice. The removed skin was sometimes displayed on the walls of conquered cities as a demonstration of power. Victims who survived long enough typically died from infection, hypothermia, or cardiovascular collapse caused by the loss of the skin barrier that regulates body temperature and fluid retention. Number 1. Lingchi, known in the West as death by 1,000 cuts, used in China from roughly 900 AD until it was officially abolished in 1905. It was the highest form of judicial punishment reserved for the most serious crimes against the state, family, and social order. The execution was designed to prolong consciousness and suffering for as long as biologically possible. In its most documented form, the victim was bound to a frame in a public setting. An executioner then made a series of precise cuts to the body, each one calibrated to cause maximum pain without causing rapid blood loss or unconsciousness. Early cuts targeted the fleshy parts of the arms, thighs, and chest. As the process continued, the cuts deepened and became more targeted. In some recorded variations, the executioner drew lots to determine the sequence of cuts, extending the randomness and terror of the process. In the most extreme historical accounts, the process could last for days if the executioner was skilled enough and the authorities desired maximum duration. Photographs of the practice taken in 1905, the year of its abolition, remain among the most disturbing historical documents ever recorded.
The practice was abolished by imperial decree, not because of mercy, but because foreign diplomatic pressure made its continuation politically untenable. These 10 methods span thousands of years and dozens of civilizations. They were not the work of uniquely evil individuals. They were codified systems, approved by governments, celebrated by crowds, and applied by ordinary people following orders. The most disturbing thing about the worst punishments in human history is not their cruelty. It is how normal they were to the people who used them.